This is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Good morning. Whether you call it a challenging situation, as the Biden administration has been calling it recently, or as a crisis, as Governor Abbott and other Republicans across the country have been labeling it, the number of people crossing our southern border illegally has drastically increased these last few months. Governor Abbott is leaving no doubt where he stands on where the fault lies.
There is a crisis on the Texas border right now with the overwhelming number of people who are coming across the border. This crisis is a result of President Biden's open border policies. It invites illegal immigration and is creating a humanitarian crisis in Texas right now that will grow increasingly worse by the day. One of the reasons for this crisis that has led to a dramatic change in just a few months is the change in policy. There was a policy that people who had come across the border illegally would be returned across the border, and there was also the Remain in Mexico policy. With the elimination of those policies, that led to a dramatic increase in the number of people coming across the border.
Joining me this morning, Charles Foster, chairman of Foster LLC that specializes in U.S. and global immigration services. Parker Sheffy, who is a supervising attorney at the University of Houston Law Center Immigration Clinic. Good morning to you both. The number of illegal crossings has certainly gone up in the past few months. Charles, is the governor right about the change in policy and the Biden administration responsible for this uptick?
Cambrell, there's a little bit of truth in what he said, but mostly it's really over the top, a great exaggeration. The numbers are up. That has more to do with conditions in Mexico and Central America. Mexico, a year or two ago, their numbers were way down, but because of the pandemic and the 2020 depressed economy in Mexico, the numbers are way up, number one. Conditions in Central America, they've had 2 devastating hurricanes on top of all their other problems. So those are all what we call push factors. So that's probably the biggest cause. There may be some truth to what the governor says, to the extent that the Biden administration is taking frankly, a more legalistic approach to it. In other words, trying to follow American laws with respect to those seeking asylum in the United States.
And Parker, let me ask Parker about this, because you talk about that. Is that effort by the Biden administration to provide a, quote, more humane asylum process, as Mr. Foster said, a more legalized way to do it, is that backfiring and resulting in this really increase in folk coming across, you think?
Well, I think you have to look at the greater context, and that the push factors that Mr. Foster identified have been going on for years, right? This is not a new reality. Rather, there have been, quote unquote, surges in individuals seeking entry to the United States under Obama, under the Trump administration, and under the now Biden administration. And so I think it invites the question, well, if you have the policies in the Trump administration that were sought to deter, namely family separation, the migrant protection protocol, that didn't stop individuals from seeking to come. So regardless of how, so it doesn't change the reality. The reality is people are coming. The question then presents, how do you effectively respond? Is it going to be in a humane way or otherwise?
Charles, isn't it true that even in the best of times, a U.S. immigration system could be described as broken? And if that's true, what's the best way to fix it?
Yes, there are a lot of problems with our immigration system. First of all, surprisingly, it's extraordinarily sensitive. For example, take those coming in from Mexico. If we had a viable temporary workers program, we could route them into that program, and they wouldn't have to come up here, abandon their families, and then try to smuggle them in. They'd come work when the economy was down in Mexico and when there were jobs in the U.S., and they would go home. That's just one thing. If we could deal with the large undocumented population, we could also be more effective in terms of employer sanctions as well. But we can't deal with that independently. Mm-hmm. We also have to deal with the reality that our asylum system is broken in many ways, one of which is the definition, which is really a Cold War definition. And I'd like to make this central point. The real question is, we have this sort of one-off problem of people coming up from the 3, not all of the Central American countries, and they're seeking asylum. what the Trump administration tried to do, it was sort of inconvenient, so they decided to set aside the law and prohibit them from even trying to do so, pushing them back into Mexico under their Remain in Mexico policy. What the Biden administration is saying is we've got, particularly for children and families with children, we've got to give them some sort of a due process in fairness. The real problem is that there are so many people that have applied that people can take advantage of that. We need to have a substantial increase in the number of asylum officers, immigration judges, trial attorneys, so that we can deal with these cases humanely but fast, so that they can have their due process hearing. And a lot of them will be denied under the current definition of asylum. But that's better than the quandary we're in right now of either having to warehouse them and keep them incarcerated for long periods of time, or release them and hope that they will reappear for their hearings.
So, Parker, what are you hearing in terms of ideas, possible solutions as to how to solve what's going on right now? We talk about long-term solutions that might be effective down the road. What would you suggest, or what have you heard as might be a possible good suggestion to solve the force that's at the border now, the challenges that are overriding the border at this point?
Well, one thing I think that's important to recognize is, as we think about this population and this recent increase in individuals, is there's essentially two buckets of individuals, because you have the individuals who have been forced to remain in Mexico, whose processes are now just being adjudicated by the Biden administration's rescission of that policy. And then you also have this other bucket of individuals who are now coming. So I think it's helpful to think in terms of the two respective populations. And so as it pertains to the Migrant Protection Protocol, the Remain in Mexico policy, it's a matter of, exactly as Charles said, allowing those individuals to seek their legal claim to asylum that's grounded both in American law as well as our international obligations. And if they pass the threshold screening, then they're able to enter the country. With respect to long-term big policy, I think you have to start getting to the deeper level question of what are those push factors in those countries that will enable those countries to provide a place where their nationals aren't seeking to leave.
Right. Well, we'll get more with Charles Foster and Parker Sheffy just a minute after the break, including ideas about cutting through some of the significant partisan roadblocks to reach an understanding about changing our immigration process for the better for everyone when Houston Newsmakers continues.